lot different. Yeah, the state purchased this in 1888 and all the way until 1971. It's like a little gas station general store right there. But the state only had the house. This is a little property. So there was private property here, private property there, and since the Park Service took control in 72, started getting more of the property all around the home and restoring it back to his appearance that we have here today. This is the way Abraham Lincoln left his house when he departed in early 1861 to head towards the White House. So remember, this is the only home he ever owned. He lived in Springfield for over 25 years, 17 of those years inside this house. He said he came to Springfield a young man and will leave it an old man. Here, his children were born and one is buried. So this house can tell us a lot of stories. So follow me in and let's get warm.
Hi, excuse me. So where's the visiting center we can purchase a ticket? Is that building over there? Oh, the brown one? If you go straight down the sidewalk.
Did they have
Thank you.
the wood planks there for sidewalks?
I can hear you.
Oh, did they have the wood planks for sidewalks?
Did it? Yeah, you guys are going to head right here to these farmers. Welcome. Got it. I want to come right over here and get right towards the middle so everyone can see me and hear me here. So as you guys start to go inside Lincoln's home, you know what y'all think? Is it what you expected? Disappointed? Satisfied?
No, it's beautiful.
When I first came in here, it looked a lot like a museum. Very official looking, but this is the way Abraham Lincoln had it. We know that because of these sketches here on the floor. You see, when Abraham Lincoln got his nomination to go to the White House, well, nobody knew who he was. Who was this rail spitter? So he opened up his door to the paparazzi. They came in here and they sketched his house to show the United States who Abraham Lincoln was and how he lived his life. And these drawings came in handy to help us put his house back together. Now, the house didn't start off looking like this. When Abraham first moved in here, it was a single-story building. Over here in the back half of the master bedroom, over here in the front half was the sitting room. But as Abraham Lincoln's life grew, as his wife and children and his family grew, his money grew, his business grew, well, his house had to grow as well. So a few years after moving in, he would add on a second story. And that bedroom would move upstairs, the sitting room would move to the next room over, and the back half would become his makeshift office. It was here in the back half of this room where Abraham Lincoln got the word of his nomination by the Republican Party. And when he heard the news, he loved it, but he didn't say yes. Instead, he said that he'll think about it. Because the year was 1860, and we were on the verge of the Civil War. And Abraham Lincoln knew that the South was already vehemently against it because when he was against slavery. Abraham had been standing up to slavery for a very long time. Ever since he was a freshman congressman in the 1840s, he had been standing up against slavery. So much so that it got him in a little bit of a black cloud over his head, and some newspapers even got him labeled as a traitor because of some of the things he was saying. And he did not win public office for a few years until finally that nomination came to him in 1860. But he still had to think about it because he knew if he made it to the White House, it would rip apart the country. And he had to wonder, could he bring it back together if he became president? So the weight of the world pretty much got on his shoulders right here in the back half of this room. Now you see it all decorated here. We don't decorate it like this all the time. So this is just some of the Christmas decorations going up here. And it's funny to think about. You see, when Abraham Lincoln actually won his election to go to the White House, he had a few months before he departed. So he was ready to go pretty much by November. Well, he didn't have to go to the White House until March. But in those few months until he left, the United States started breaking apart. Every day he would sit over here in his makeshift office reading the newspaper, seeing what was happening in the United States, seeing what was happening to the world that was coming around him when he was stepping into the presidency. The Confederate United States were born when he was sitting here inside this house as well. And he had to wonder exactly what would he get himself into. So we can almost say that this presidency came to him at the time that probably didn't expect it, and maybe when he didn't even want it. But luckily, as history has shown us, he said yes to us, because I think fate played a little bit of a part in choosing the right man for the job. So luckily, he said yes, because Abraham Lincoln was getting ready to lead the United States through the most difficult time that it would ever see. Now, Abraham Lincoln, though, in this room, when he was kept as official business, he had his next room over the sitting room where it would be a place where he could pretty much let his hair down. In the next room, he didn't have to be a politician. He didn't have to have official business. In the next room, he was a husband and a father, and it was there where he would often join his wife and children. So why don't you guys go ahead and start heading towards that room. We're going to pass to the dining room, so take a good look around it, and then continue into the sitting room. It's the next larger with red wallpaper. Some of it is. the black upholstered horsehair furniture, and the bookshelf here.
The reason I wonder is that's so short for a man of his height.
Oh, yeah. The average height was 5'6". And he had his furniture custom built. He had to get what was manufactured.
Okay.
Inside the sitting room, we got a good chance to look around at a common Christmas dinner there inside the dining room. Ham, venison a lot of the time, and oysters even commonplace during the Christmas holidays. Now, as you enter inside this room, also you get to see those Christmas decorations, right? Some of those children's toys here scattered on the floor. And contrary to belief, at that time it was not common to have a Christmas tree inside your home yet. It was common to have one maybe in a place of business like the bank or the law office, but in every single home it was not common practice yet. What was common practice though was hanging Christmas stockings up on the mantle, which is simulated right there in front of us. But the Lincolns, well, when they hung up their stockings, they used nails. And you can see remnants of those stocking hangings in that mantle with all the holes in the wood. Because all those holes symbolize there are memories being created. 17 years inside of a house is a long time to create a lot of memories. Good memories, bad memories. And you can imagine Abraham Lincoln sitting here inside this room playing with his children. Well, unfortunately, when Abraham Lincoln moved here into this house a few years after, he would lose his second-born child. Their firstborn son, William, was 9 months old at the time when they moved in here. And then they had their second son, Edward. He would pass away before he was even 4 years old. He would pass away in the master parent's bedroom when it was the room that we just left a little bit ago. His funeral would be held in one of those parlors as well. But Abraham Lincoln loved playing with his children and supporting them every chance he gets, and a chance to better their lives was going to be a very big priority. And we see a symbol of that with some other toys in this room, particularly that toy on top of the table with that tall box. That box up there is a stereoscope. It creates a 3D image of a picture. Top of the line technology cost Abraham Lincoln $30 back in the day. Today's money, that's about $800. From Abraham Lincoln, a man who was born to a father who could not read, could barely sign his own name. Abraham Lincoln would only get 1 year of formal schooling. But he wanted to be somebody. He wanted to better himself. You can pretty much say the shaping of the American dream took place for him right here within these walls in his home. Because this house doesn't tell the story of President Abraham Lincoln, it tells the story of Abraham Lincoln, the husband and the father. The man who had just this ambition and wanted to see the best for his family and then wanted to see the best for his country. Because those ideals that he would take with him to the presidency had their roots right here in his home, in his living room, and of course, in his bedroom, which we'll see upstairs next. So I invite you guys to follow me upstairs. But before we head on up, I invite you to use the handrail. It's an original piece of the home that you can touch. It is there for your safety. And it's the same handrail Abraham Lincoln used going upstairs. So in essence, it's almost like shaking hands with him. So use the handrail.
Is the wallpaper original?
I'll talk about that upstairs. Follow me.
Right.
No.
I'm curious about.
I me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's a nice size room, isn't it?
And, I showed you those sketches down there that the newspaper did to tell us about Abraham Lincoln's life, but they didn't go into detail. One of the things they actually drew what the carpet and the wallpaper looked like, and all that stuff fades over time. So everything you saw down below was pretty much educated guesses of what the Park Service has learned was popular at the time and was popular with the Lincolns. Except for this room here. In this room, we know exactly what the wallpaper looked like. Because during the restoration process, we're peeling away year and year of old paint and old wallpaper, we got to the original core of this room and saw the same wallpaper Abraham Lincoln woke up to every morning he woke up in his bedroom.
Wow.
We had it recreated by a company in California, so you guys can see the exact same thing today. And we found out that it's the exact same wallpaper Mary had in her room as well. It's a good time to bring up that Mary would suffer greatly from migraine headaches. You can probably see why.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on with this wall.
Very busy.
But it's definitely a great piece of history that you guys get to, well, see for yourselves. And for Abraham Lincoln to have his own bedroom here was very common at the time. If you had the money and you had the space, you would have a his and her bedroom. So Mary had her room, you'll see that in a bit, and Abraham had his. But Mary would often say that Abraham's room came in handy because even when he was here, he wasn't really here. His mind was always elsewhere when he was thinking about the next step in his life, or he was hard at work, with a lot of his time being spent right there at that corner desk. Because that desk actually did belong to Abraham Lincoln. You see, the newspaper would write that if you walk by Abraham Lincoln's home at 1 o'clock in the morning, you could still see a candle burning at his corner window. Well, Abraham Lincoln was at that desk, hard at work, and it saw the shaping of a lot of the future of America, because he would write his inaugural address right there on that desk, as well as portions of the House Divided speech. And we talked a little bit about Abraham Lincoln's height, right? 6'4". That looks pretty small for a 6'4" guy. Well, back then, the average height of a gentleman was 5'6", and Abraham Lincoln didn't have very much money. To finally purchase this house here, he had to borrow a lot of the money from his own father-in-law. He couldn't afford it, and that desk right there, he actually had with him for quite some time. One of the few pieces of furniture that he kept and lugged around with him everywhere he lived. And one attempt, Mary tried throwing it away. Abraham Lincoln pulled it out of the trash and brought it up here to his room because he wanted to hold on to that desk. We're very lucky to still have that here in our possession. Now, depending on what you're reading about with Abraham and his wife Mary, all these reports differ about the relationship. Well, what we do know that survives their correspondence and letters is that they greatly loved each other, showed a great admiration for each other, and they would write about missing each other whenever they were apart. And it was well known at the time that if Abraham Lincoln was going to make any decision regarding his family, his wife Mary would have some say-so. They would make the decision together as a couple before any major life decision. So she had some say-so in the decision to go to the White House. Because she would always tell people that one day she would marry a man who would become president. So when Abraham Lincoln let her know about his nomination, how do you think she felt? I bet you that she couldn't wait to tell her friends, and maybe even she jumped up and down in her bed. So I invite you guys to walk into Mary's room next. You have a question?
How tall are the door frames?
The door frames? I don't know. 6'2".
So he would
I'm
would
not
he
too
have
sure
had
he's
to
that height.
duck to go through them?
Oh yeah. Yeah, he was 6'4".
Yeah.
And it's a little bit taller here. I think it's about here. I
Yeah.
think.
How tall are you?
But the door frames, if you'll notice, they're changing all the time. And every that we go to, they're going to differ.
Yeah, 'cause the
One's
floor-
higher, this one's lower. This
Yeah.
one's a little bit higher also. Yeah. But I invite you guys to walk through Mary's room here. You walk through here, take a look around, and enter into the hallway.
Yeah, we all shrink.
We do.
Well, we are pretty sure in the color-wise of it, because back then, whatever colors you had, you would use. It wasn't about like matching color, like, oh, everything's gonna have like this fall color. Everything, okay, we have green, we have red, we have everywhere. Oh, okay. And it was harmony through contrast. It was very popular at that time, and using as much color as possible.
Is it true that Lincoln had Marfan syndrome?
Had what?
Marfan syndrome?
Never heard of that. What is that?
It's a disorder that's typically it's noted by very tall people, elongated fingers. I believe who's that Olympic swimmer?
Phelps?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mark Phelps has it.
I have
Or
never
Michael
heard
Phelps.
about
I'm sorry,
that
Michael
being
Phelps.
regarded to Lincoln of having anything like that can be, I guess, diagnosed. I mean, the closest thing that's about, we're looking back at him today to how it was back then is maybe he was like a manic depressive. About having a symptom like
I
that.
had heard that said before. It was something to do with obsessive nature.
I hadn't heard that. I'm gonna look it up though. I'm curious. Well, as you guys come back here into this back hallway, hopefully you got a chance to peek there into the boys' bedroom.
Marfan's?
Yeah, had you heard the same thing?
Oh, yeah.
Really? I hadn't come across that yet. I'm gonna look that up.
My dad's a huge Civil War.
Big buff of
Yeah,
Civil
yeah.
War.
Huge.
Yeah, that's
I'm
one of
becoming
my
more and more a
stories
Civil War
all the
buff
time.
all the time.
History's amazing. It's my
But
favorite.
you see, for the Lincoln children, when they first moved in here, as I mentioned to you, their oldest son Robert was 9 months old at the time, and he didn't get his very own room until he was 12 years old. So it shows you how long it took him to actually.
Wait,
build
can you
this
say that
thing.
again? I want to make sure my kids hear that.
Oh, his
Didn't
son
get-
Robert was 9 months old at the time when they moved in here.
Didn't get his own room until when?
12 years old.
See, it's a long time.
Long time until he moved in here. And even then, he had to share with the rest of his brothers. Up until that point, they were used to sleeping on the foot. I should say on the floor of their parents' bed. So when they got their own room, they loved it. But with all the space here in the house, and his and her bedroom, a guest room, all those boys would still be relegated here to this one room. And it didn't take long for them to develop a reputation for themselves either, especially throughout the neighborhood. Even though they had those 4 boys, they had Robert, they had Edward, they had William, and they had Tad, but collectively these 4 boys were known under one nickname of Brats. They were known for being on the balcony outside their window, throwing snowballs at men that passed by, or even using the bathroom sometimes from on top of that balcony.
Funny.
Yeah, so if you guys lived next door to the Lincolns and saw their children doing that, would you want them to move to Washington? Maybe so. But Abraham Lincoln pretty much had to answer for his children, especially whenever they went to the law offices. To his law partner, Herndon, he did not like when the children came over because they wrecked the joint. Ink all over the place, books thrown about, and Abraham Lincoln would not get mad at them whatsoever. And Abraham Lincoln had to answer for his children to his law partner and say that he not believe in what he called parental tyranny, basically discipline. And he said that the closest way for a parent to be to their child was going to be through love. You can imagine how much those brats must have gotten away with. But Abraham Lincoln wanted to give them everything that he never had, and he said that he had gotten enough of that from his own father and his own upbringing. So you really can't blame him for wanting to spoil them every chance that he got. Now, back over there in that final bedroom, we have one other person who lived inside this house. Anybody want to guess who lived out there inside that room?
Well, it looks like a little girl's portrait, the dress in the bed. So the housekeeper?
You're getting closer. But the Lincolns didn't have any girls.
A nanny?
Yeah, there you go. You're on the right path. So by 1860, Abraham Lincoln was on the road already 6 months out of the year. He was a heavily sought-after lawyer. He was already representing railroads and corporations. He was involved in cases from divorces all the way to murder. And it kept him on the road a lot of the time or late at night, working it well into the night. So you can't blame Mary for needing just a little bit of help. Now, when Abraham went to Washington, he would hear, how can you be against slavery when you have slaves? But the Lincolns never had any slaves. They just had and hired help. It was a girl, usually an immigrant from Portugal, Germany, or Ireland, and usually between the ages of 12 and 25 years old. They would make about 25 cents a day. Now, at that time, it was pretty much minimum wage. But if you think about it, for an immigrant to come into the United States and earn that amount of money, but also get room and board, especially being so far away from women's rights and women voting, it was a pretty good step in the right direction for them. But nonetheless, the Lincolns ended up going through about 16 different hired girls the time they lived inside this house. And why do you think that is? Yes, exactly. They had a great way of weeding through the babysitter for sure. But Abraham Lincoln, when he was ready to tell the world after 4 days of going over it, should he say yes, should he say no to this nomination? Was it the right thing to do for himself and for his family to leave his home where he created all these memories? Abraham was ready to say yes. Only thing is, he wanted to tell his wife first and foremost what he decided, and he would find her downstairs cooking away at breakfast. So why don't you guys walk in Abe's footsteps and start heading down those stairs into the kitchen. It'll be our final stop in Lincoln's home.
I guess everybody was short.
So as we come down here into the kitchen, this was one of the family's favorite rooms as well. Especially Mary. She loved to do the cooking. You see, for Mary, though, she came from the opposite upbringing than Abraham Lincoln. She was born to a rich family, to the aristocracy. She was used to having slaves, having help, and never having to lift a finger. But when she got together with Abraham, her life became a complete 180. She had to do the cooking and the cleaning, taking care of the family. And it was a lifestyle that she fully embraced. However, she still loved some of that upper class that she had back home in Kentucky. And when the Lincolns first moved in here, this kitchen was a whole lot bigger. And I actually went over there next door into the dining room a lot more. But Mary had come from an upbringing where those two things were kept separate. So right away, she sacrificed space in order to put a wall up and have the kitchen off to its own side and delegate it to its own room. Now, for the Lincolns, the majority of the time they lived here, they cooked over an open fire. But with Abraham's nomination, Mary wanted to do some entertaining, so Abraham gifted his wife this top-of-the-line stove right here. It cost him $28. A few dollars less than he paid for a toy for his children, bought his wife a brand new stove. And Mary fell in love with it. She wanted to do some entertaining thanks to Abraham's nomination. So that very first party they threw cooking on this stove, about 300 guests showed up. The next party, about 200. So right from the get-go, this stove started seeing a lot of mileage, and Mary fell in love with it. So much so that she wanted to see it in the White House. But Abraham told her no, they already have a kitchen and a stove in the White House and they'll leave it here for the next family. And that's when they had to come to a decision, what do they do with their home? What would you guys do with your home? The only one that you ever owned, that you had to work hard to afford, that you couldn't even afford. You had to borrow money from your father-in-law. And you create these good memories and these bad memories. You would sell it or you want to return to this house, huh?
Rent it
I
out.
ran it.
And you rent it out? Well, that's what the Lincolns are doing because Abraham didn't want to come back. He felt proud about the only house he owned. Because imagine the last time he came down these stairs here for the final time, not knowing if he was going to come back or not. He walked here into this kitchen and he realized it is the exact same size as the log cabin that he was born in Kentucky. 18 by 20 feet in size. His whole family crammed that little structure. Now here it was the size of his kitchen. And the home that he had at over 2,000 square feet. And it was getting ready to go to the most important house in the United States, the White House. You can imagine how proud he must have felt, and when we returned home, feeling proud all over again. So the Lincolns decided to put their house up for rent, with full intention of coming back over here. Well, the renters that moved in here, they didn't have very much furniture, so the Lincolns sold them their furniture. When those renters finally moved out, they took all that furniture with them, all to Chicago, and it would all burn in the Great Chicago Fire.
Oh, no.
What we have left behind is only about 10% of what the Lincolns actually owned. The stove, a little percentage of it, the dining room table, the desk I showed you upstairs. But a lot of furniture, such as random chairs and drawers and chests, but also the beds, were also burned in that great fire. But that's okay. These are just material things that the Lincolns were willing to part with. They don't tell the full story, but what really tells the story is this house. Because once a bullet went and changed the history for the Lincolns, Abraham never got a chance to return to the house that he loved and felt so proud of. And his wife, Mary, was so traumatized by the loss of her husband, she would never set foot in this house again. And when she finally came back to Springfield, she just moved in with her sister and never saw this house again. She said the memories of her family were far too great. And those memories she had were not of President Abraham Lincoln, the man, the myth, the legend, the man carved in stone by a stone pool of water in D.C. Instead, her memories were of Abraham Lincoln, the husband and the father. The man who had just a little bit of ambition and wanted to see the best for his family and then wanted to see the best for his country because all that had his roots right here in the only home he ever owned. Well, my name is Ranger Paul. Hope you guys enjoyed this tour.
Ranger Paul, didn't her sister live nearby?
Yeah, 5 blocks west.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There's a replica of that house, the Edwards house, at the end of the street right here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it got built up there in the 60s.
So did
Yeah.
her sister live there the whole time? I mean,
Well, at her house, yeah. She lived in her house the whole time. But then Mary, she was in an asylum for a little bit. She lived in Europe for a while. She lived with her son for a while. And then she moved in with her sister at the end of her life when she finally came back to town.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.